Welcome to the Claus YouTube channel.
Together, we strive for a safer, secure, and more stable world.
Good evening, viewers, and welcome General Sudhakar Jee and Col Vikram Singh on the Jaipur military dialogue under the aegis of clause. We have finally come to China after discussing Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and today is a country which is more dynamic than what we have discussed. It has a very, very significant role for us as well as in the international scenario. For the discussion, we have Jan Sudhakar Ji, an eminent geopolitical and international affairs expert, and Col Vikram Singh is also a seasoned research and geopolitical expert on international affairs. He's got many papers what he has written. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you, sir.
A brief on China. China is I think Mr. Akash had put a question which he says, are they really ancient civilization? I think Akash, I'll answer that along with when I speak. China is, yes, like India, an ancient civilization. And we have been having very good relations when the ancient civilization, the culture, and the mix of things which have been there. Buddhism went there around 2,500 years back. And we have read about the two Chinese travelers who came to Nalanda University of that time. And they have written a lot about India and a lot about China of that time. China, if you look at it geographically, is located and has borders with around 14 countries, around 22,000 kilometers of borders with all the countries which are there, 14 countries. And it has a sea coast on the East China Sea and South China Sea, which is crucial for China's maritime trade, maritime security, maritime access to the oceans along that, and the states along with East China Sea and South China Sea. And both these seas are there where our nations are sprinkled over, small nations along the sea, and China has to negotiate with them. There also they have some issues with the maritime boundaries with these countries which are there. And most of the borders what China has, that in terms of say kilometers, more than 3,000, 4,000 is Russia, India, and Mongolia. The major borders are there. Then they have tried to resolve the issues with most of the nations around, and some of the nations, the things are there. One aspect which I want to bring out is that China has been a civilization along with India, which we have been having very cordial relations earlier, but with the disputes coming in and probably the present dynamics which is taking place, and it is in terms of the competitions of both the nations like India and China. They are in both economic and militarily powerful nations as of now. And the reason that international geopolitics is very important, which is playing the role. It is not directly and indirectly affecting India and China, and their relationships is being affected. And the role of the neighboring countries is also part of that. China started its journey for development in 1949. They had a premier Mao, then Chou Enlai, and after 49, they have been working very hard. Probably the form of the government is the one which have taken the stride, and they have done leaps and bound development in the financial economic sector, and yes, in the military hardware, military presence at various places. China's theory is that yes, with the economic development, they are also looking at their footprints in the world with the financial force, economic development, economic funds, and one road, one belt initiative is there. Those things are there, which are the show of China. The presence of China is being put across the world at various places. The most important issue in relation, two issues are there. One is the world scenario, where does China stand? Now, in the present scenario, with the world coming something like not unipolar, many polars, you can call it a multipolar, China does play a role. And one issue which was coming to my mind, that if you see that in 1962 we had a war with China, and they said Hindi Chini, Hindi Chini bye bye. I would say I will reverse it. We'll say Chini Hindi bye bye, and try to utilize China to our advantage. That issue needs to be seen. Two big nations have to deal on a broader platform, and probably in the coming times, as things happen, there are one issue is their thought is there that the war is imminent, or the friction is imminent between these two nations. Second issue is to my on a military mind, and to my I would say that the world issues which one look at it, I look at it from a very different angle. I look at it from the angle that if it is India and China go along, then the overall world scenario changes. Probably the international bodies, the international other nations don't want that. It can happen. Nothing is impossible in this world. We have, I would say, the frictions with China have been there, and no major friction as such since 1962, and that continues. It resolves. It gets. It simmers up, and with the world looking at it, USA probably, if you look at the Pentagon, their doctrine, China stands as one of the prominent, they call it prominent adversary. You can say, in terms of other words, can say it's a prominent enemy. And other nations, Russia, China, and India. So the relationship between China and Russia have been generally cordial, with the both nations having the basic ideology of the same kind. And Russia and India, yes, a known fact that both nations are together in various forums, and Russia have been a very good ally and friend of India in various times of need. So today the world scenario is changing in a way that the Trump's tariffs coming in, things have changed a lot. Alignments along the nations have changed. And immediately after that, our prime minister, the Chinese premier, the Russian president, so all those issues which are there in our visit of our prime minister to Japan, so all these things are coming up in a way that probably the world is getting sized up, not divided, sized up into, say, the Asians, along with, say, the people who are the US and others are there, Europe, some portion of Europe is there. So they are looking at those issues, and how things happen is a question. And today, the important issue which needs to be discussed is the development of China, and China's relationship, in particular, worldwide, the major nations, and China's relationship with India, and what is the future, what's going to happen. So first, I'll request Colonel Vikram to just throw a light on the present situation, which is likely to develop, and in his views, what is there. Over to you, Colonel Vikram.
Sir, good evening, General Sudhakar and Brigadier Birendra, sir. Thanks a lot for giving me an opportunity to talk about China situation per se. As you already covered about the history, I'll talk about the strategic and economic rivalry which is happening as of now, or is been happening since the ages. Today, as you know, gentlemen, the China and India represent two models of growth. Coming on to China per se, China state led manufacturing, rapid infrastructure, and global outreach through the Belt and Road Initiative. Coming on to India per se, democratic, digital, and service driven growth with alliances like the Quad and Indo-Pacific framework. The question is not who will grow faster, but who will shape the rules of the next century. That's more important. Because make no mistake, the center of global gravity is shifting from west to Asia. Now I'll talk about the military and geopolitical dimensions. The line of actual control, which is more than 3,400 kilometers long, is not just a border, it's a statement of strategy. China has used salami slicing tactics, which is changing ground reality bit by bit. India has responded with infrastructure upgrades, strategic partnerships, and an assertive foreign policy. The real battle, however, is for perception. Who defines the narrative, who leads the Asian century, will develop on resilience, clarity, and strategic patience. Talk about the civilization and human angle. Despite the rivalry, gentlemen, both societies share similar aspirations, development, dignity, and global respect. As civilization, both nations can learn from each other. China's discipline, India's democracy, China's manufacturing power, India's innovation spirit. The challenge is to find competition without confrontation, rivalry without war. If you talk about the future outlook, sir, in the next decade or so, three things will define India-China relations. Firstly, the technology dominance. As we know, are aware, AI, semiconductors, and cyber power. The second point would be the geopolitical alliances, Quad, BRICS, SCO. These three things where both nations test coexistence. Lastly, the border stability, because the peace at the border remains the foundation for progress at home. Whether we see cooperation or conflict depend on how both nations manage these three fronts. That's all from my end, sir.
Thank you, Colonel Vikram. Very aptly covered. You had covered the aspect of the historical civilization traits of both the nations and
Yeah,
where they can walk along together.
yeah,
And the aspects are very, very pertinent in the today's context, which I also feel that why not walk the talk together, both India and China. If
yeah,
they are together, they can resolve their own issues which are there. Competition remaining, it's a fair competition. We deal what plus points we have and utilize their plus points to our own advantage. With this, I'll request Jan Sudhakar Jee to cover the broader and minute aspects of the China's development and China's role in today's world, and in particularly the oceans and the South China Sea, and more so towards our side in India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, the latest thing what has happened. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Virendra, good evening. Thank you for getting me for your show in the we missed out, I think, on last Saturday because of some prior commitment and preoccupations. And very warm welcome to Colonel Vikram Singh.
thank you, sir.
The subject per se, uh, you cannot do justice in 30 minutes or 40 minutes. It's a vast subject, as large as China. So let's start with the geography. How large is China? Because there are military people, I suppose they should be listening to us. If they are not listening, if they are lost, because like you are an expert, Virender yourself, so has Vikram, and I have had hands down experience of commanding troops along the entire northern border, all three sectors: eastern, middle, and the western sector.
Sure.
So one has been very lucky that way. One never thought life would take a turn like this. So how big is China? China is approximately, roughly, maybe a couple of 100, 200 kilometers this side, that side, is 4,500 kilometers north south to around 5,000 kilometers west to east. There may be little variation, but this is just to give a broad idea for our listener, for our audience, to get how big. So it is as big as that of USA. Okay, so we'll not go into the details of the administrative divisions and all. They got roughly around 30 plus kind of divisions, call them provinces or anything. But there are a couple of issues we need to keep in mind. The issues are China, if you are looking at historically, you have to understand the true China, real China was in 10th century. The name of the uh, monarchy or the king that time it used to be called the Tang dynasty, 10th century. So in 10th century, the rough estimate or the size of China was around 1200 kilometers by 1100 or 1200 kilometers, and it was it was biased towards the eastern flank or hugging the east coast of China. So how much is the east coast? East coast is approximately 14,000 kilometers as of now. So why East Coast is important? Because much of, apart from the continental invasions that you, me, all of us are aware of, major outside forces who invaded, overseas forces who invaded China, all the invasions were from the eastern flank. So why am I trying to highlight that? I'm highlighting this because any invasion which takes place from a particular flank, there has to be some reason as to why the invasion took place from the eastern flank. It took place because 60%, more than 60%, people call it in historical document more than 60%, but I'm telling you, more than 94 to 95% of Chinese population, they are along the eastern flank. So, how do you define this eastern flank? Eastern flank is 600 kilometers roughly from the east coast towards the hinterland. What is this line called as? It is called a 15 isoheight line. What is the meaning of 15 isoheight line? Meaning of 15 isoheight line is that east of this line, the country receives copious, very heavy downpour. The rainfall is heavy. West of it, very scanty rainfall. So, how does it impact? It impacts because China as a country has got very limited land for cultivation. So, how much is the limited land? It is around 12% of the total land available in China is arable land. So, how is China surviving? China is surviving by assimilating technology, by conducting double crop cultivation, or it is doing land grabbing elsewhere other than China. So, which are the countries where it has been doing land grabbing? Today, Africa as a continent has got 7% of the total landmass has already been purchased or grabbed, or whatever expression you want to use, it is under Chinese control. 7% of total land of Africa. Where else? In US, there are hundreds and thousands hectares of land which Chinese firms have taken over. And they are very intelligent. Chinese people are buying land in US which are close to sensitive military installations. Every capital of a province, I don't think there is an exception in any kind of leading economies in the world, be it Europe or America, will always have a Chinatown. So why Chinatown is important? Chinatown is important because of the latest philosophy which China discreetly is promoting without creating any ruffles. What is the philosophy? It is known as the island of convenience. What is island of convenience? It is the weaponization of the HR, human resource, the Han Chinese. The Han Chinese are being encouraged to go and settle down in Chinatown, get married to the locals. Morocco, you take the example of Morocco, if you Google up, you'll study that there is a population demographic change in Morocco. They go marry the females and start claiming the land. Okay, so this is the pattern which is emerging. Now, apart from that, what else should I convey? Because I'm sure the military people also will listen to this. I personally feel that little bit of historical background should be understood. When I say historical background, people must understand what China has gone through. It has gone through, they call it a century of humiliation, but I would say it is more than a century, more than 2200 years, 2200 years of people have come, kicked them left and right, they have been humiliated. But they call it as a century of humiliation. What is that century? Century is from 1835, I think, to 1935 or 1945. Okay, this is the century they want to redeem themselves. What do they want to redeem? They want to redeem the concept of rejuvenating the concept of Middle Kingdom. What is this concept of Middle Kingdom? The concept of Middle Kingdom is that historically, China has always believed and perceived itself to be the central of the planet. Rest all countries are around China. They want to redeem the century of humiliation, so much so that our viewers will do well to correlate and understand. I think it is still being practiced. China has got national from 1949 onwards till date. I think it is still applicable. They have got a couple of days as holidays, national holidays as the humiliation days. Now, why? Isn't it very deplorable and dismal to celebrate something negative like this? No. China celebrates these holidays of national holidays of humiliation simply to inject a spirit of nationalism because they have had losses, because they have been humiliated in the past. Therefore, there is a requirement of every Chinese to have that spirit of redemption. So, and therefore, they have kept a goal by 2049 or before 2049, they would redeem the century of humiliation and they will rejuvenate the very concept of Middle Kingdom. Thereby, they become a global power and they challenge the supremacy and the authority of America. Now, how far have they gone? Have they been able to achieve anything? They have had significant success. We may, when we are addressing troops, we generally, it is customary not to make our enemy 7.5 feet tall when you are going for the offensive, when you have to face them face to face. But when you are discussing issues theoretically through this medium, it is incumbent on our part to be practical, realistic, and pragmatic in our approach. Never underestimate your enemy. When I say never underestimate your enemy, the same China had around $362 billion of GDP sometime in 1991. We had around 262 or so. Okay. And our infrastructure was far better in 70s and 80s. Our economy was far better than China. And taking off from 1991, by 2007, we had an economy of $1 trillion. It took us almost about 60 years. China that time was around, I think, 3.4, close to 4 trillion. By 2014, we had become a $2 trillion. By 2014, China had become a $10 trillion. 12 to 14, that is the block timing MC. By 2019, we had become something around $3 trillion. By 2019, China had become close to almost about 16, 17 trillion. By 2025, we are 4.19. China is about to very close to crossing $20 trillion. I'm talking in terms of nominal GDP, not PPP. As far as PPP goes, China has overtaken USA, I think, a year and a half back. They are already sitting tight on a 40 trillion PPP terms of GDP. USA is around 30. India is around 17.77 or so. Call it at 17 trillion. We are the third largest economy, and others are quite behind in PPP terms. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because we are discussing China in 21st century, not in 20th century. China has had the successful period of economy galloping in double digit almost for more than 30 years. Deng Xiaoping, he started the concept of put your head down, hide your brightness, cherish obscurity, bide time, remain silent, continue working silently for socio-economic development. In 1979, he gave out the concept that military will ride the back of agriculture, economy, science and technology, and overall development. So look at the way they have come. The modernization of China, while the economy took off from 79, 80, The real modernization de facto commenced from the year 2015. Till then, they were purging, they're carrying out corrections and other issues. While Deng Xiaoping, he propagated a concept of a passive, keep yourself absolutely, your heads down and continue working. With Xi coming in 2012, December, November, December, and 13, he took over. He changed the concept of China. He said, we have had enough of putting your head down. We have become a big economy now. It's about time that we change our philosophy to aggressive projection of power. So, from silent and passive growth, it changed to an aggressive projection of power. So, they used to call that silent growth is to be called as peaceful rise of China. But peaceful rise, they was becoming stronger and stronger. That's why often, wherever I go to talk, I always tell people, our Indians, we do chest thumping too loudly, too prematurely for everything. Even before starting AI, we have started doing chest beating. Just because our satellite has landed in the South Pole and Moon, we think no end of ourselves. And when you talk about the other issues, robotics and others, I was in Bay Area. People are talking very highly about. India is number one robotics. Unke baba chup karo yaar. Learn something from Deng Xiaoping. There are so many things to learn from the enemy. Okay, so learn how to grow silently like a tree. Don't make too much of noise. That's why I often say that till we become an economy of 10 to 15 trillion US dollar, let's learn. Let's learn how to calibrate our strategic autonomy. Let's learn how to grow silently. Much of the things are happening silently. But there are certain things where we browbeat, we start at the top of the voice in parliament and elsewhere. We tell this and tell that instead of having a very strategized, calibrated uh, plan, we tend to actually ruffle feathers and put the adversaries into such a situation that they become inimical to our progress, and every design in the world appears to be to retard the progress, economic progress of India, and to ensure that we do not become self-reliant as far as Atmanirbhar Bharat is concerned. They would like to poke a break in everything. So why not we? I think as a culture, we have a long parenting of our forefathers, and they have taught us how to grow silently. So this is a very strong lesson that talk about the critical minerals. Today, China is a country which has got a upstream, midstream, and downstream segment of critical minerals, which comprises of mining, extraction, refining, processing. 60% of the critical mineral production China dominates. 80% of the processing worldwide China dominates. China dominates because these are specialized equipments, hard and soft variety. It dominates in producing or manufacturing the very machinery which are required for the critical minerals. We may claim that we have discovered a huge area of lithium, uranium, and a host of other critical minerals, but the process of extraction and mining and processing, refining, and production is a very laborious process. It's not that the rare earth is not rare actually, there are plenty. But very process of actually mining and extraction is so laborious. You require a high-tech kind of equipment and machinery to segregate them. And China is the country which is dominating in that. So much so that while the rare earth earlier used to be a politicized kind of foreign policy, now it has started getting weaponized. We get to see quite often that China has taken recourse to weaponization of certain critical minerals. For example, antimony, you have gallium, you have germanium. You know, from monopoly, it has gone to, there is a phrase, terminology called as monopsony. Manopsony, monopsony. That is, it is the only country which actually enjoys. And without the critical mineral, nobody is anywhere. Same America, which is to dominate out of 64 critical minerals way back in 2003 to 7, they used to dominate in 61. China was leading in 3, USA is to lead in 61. Today, the whole issue, spectrum has gone ulta pulta. China is leading in 57 critical minerals in all components and parts, and it has put USA behind by many days and years. Similarly, you talk about the PhD STEM, talk about the number of global universities, talk about the global scientists, anything. So, why am I stating this? I'm stating this because people need to understand that it is very important our way forward in 21st century. Technology is the new oil. People call data is the new oil. You are going from one level to another level. At a particular level, I'm saying technology is the new oil. I am a handicap as far as technology is concerned. But that cannot be any excuse for survival in 21st century. I'm trying to upgrade myself. So my children have been forcing me to use that iPhone, this phone, Mac laptop. I don't know how to handle. I don't even know how to make slides and all. Like gone are the days. So I spent some time to update and upgrade myself, which every Indian is expected to do. Anyway, I'll put an end to that, but also let people understand. There are some of us who may not be knowing a car has got 1,000 to 3,000 chips, semiconductors. If it is an electric vehicle, it will have 3,000 chips or more. A laptop will always have one chip. A mobile will have minimum 6 chips. Likewise. So what is this chip? It is made in form of a wafer which is 30 centimeter long. It takes anything up to 3 months. It requires 2,200 gallons. That means 8,328 liters of water for fabrication. And it includes 1,500 gallons or 5,678 liters of ultra pure water, 1.5 gallon of normal ordinary water, which is 5.7 liters of incoming or ordinary normal water, is required to make 1 liter of ultra pure water. So that is the kind. And the power requirement, you require something around 1.54 kilowatt hour per centimeter square is required, is consumed to produce one wafer which is 30 centimeter long. So we can well imagine why. Now, when you look back, same country, our country, they kept on rejecting the file when the semiconductors were being discussed way back in 80s and 90s. It went to started gathering dust. Then the mid after the first decade in 2000, this century again started gathering dust. It is recently we have kick-started. We lost out good 20, 30 years, but we have kick-started. We are trying to catch up. This catch up is just to please ourselves, our internal ego. We are nowhere there. For a mobile, we are calling ourselves as the second largest exporter of mobile. And to make a mobile, you require large number of electronic components. 80 to 90% of the components are being imported. Yes, I'll be counter-argued by people saying, so which component is 100% produced in country? I said, okay, fine. If it is not 100%, can you call yourself as a self-reliant country based on the concept of indigenization and Atmanirbhar Bharat? If 90% of your components are being imported to assemble them and export them? No, that's not self-reliance. Self-reliance is that if not 100%, we should be at least more than 50% being produced in the country. So how do you start that state? Czechoslovakia, once upon a time, old man lying on the bed, he was bedridden, he was sucking the soft drink through a pipe. That's how the concept of refill started. And that refill in a ballpoint pen, it revolutionized the concept of writing. Japan, before they started making the best of the automobiles, call it Toyota or any other company in Japan, the best manufacturer, he was fiddling with a pin. And from that pin, he was getting stuck. He was not able to go ahead in manufacturing a particular engine component. So until he turned the shape and the size of the pin to look like a safety pin, that happened to be the turning point of the revolution of automobile. Japan became the biggest rival of USA way back in 80s, if you recall. Reagan, George Bush, they started imposing sanction against Japan, and along with Japan, Brazil and India also by default we had been included. That's a different kind of a geopolitics. So I'm stating this, there are a lot of things to learn from China. Let's not unnecessarily point a finger, because it is the world order which decided at one point in time to outsource everything to be manufactured in China. Today the dependency is so high that it's it's very easy to say that we'll diversify, we'll de-risk, etc., etc. But does anyone know that process of de-risking would take anything? If we have taken 40 years to allow China to grow up to this status, maybe it will take more than 40 years to de-risk. So therefore, I would say selectively, let's calibrate our approach, try and derive maximum benefit. So often I keep going for giving talk on foreign policy research and other issues. My take on the whole issue is multipolarity, from strategic non-alignment to strategic alignment, multi-alignment. We have come to a system now of phase wherein we are going to collaborate or selectively cooperate with countries where the national interests are going to be met. So when you come to this alignment, I'm sure that people in the highest level in the Mandarin or where it matters, they are already factoring in, they are doing it. So like the trade agreement, which is taking, I think Piyush Goyal is doing a fantastic job. We need not go in for a deal, abrupt manner, in a hasty manner. We need to see where the national interest is coming to be impinged or going to be compromised. We cannot afford to. So, therefore, last but not the least, for the military people, I am promising to share certain things. I want to tell you something about the Chinese strategic culture and behavior. Why am I? I have selected. There are so many. I have got my own articles have got published in number of newspapers and magazines and journals. But out of everything, I just want to tell you one thing, that highlight 3-4 issues, major issues. First and foremost thing is that China, no matter how modernized it becomes, the concept of surprise and deception will remain central in all its military concept. When Galwan happened, did anyone come to know? Or did we not have the capability to anticipate? I was there, I was GOC, it didn't happen during my time. That doesn't mean that actually it insulates me from the accountability. I am also equally responsible. As a GOC, I went to my senior commander, said, sir, within next 2 years, you'll find the Chinese coming and sitting here at finger 4. And that is what exactly happened. So are each one of us, are we discharging a role? Why it is to happen? Because army has got a very short memory. We tend to, those people who come and give a point and try to put across a new perspective and view, they are called as alarmist. I don't want to be branded anybody as an alarmist. But if you have logic, the freedom of expression should be conveyed. That is where the surprise and deception was mounting. 2011, the complete network had, our people might have forgotten, there was a time when China used to take 2 seasons, 2 years, they used to mobilize. Their military plan is to have mobilization towards the border against India. 2 years they used to take to mobilize and come to the operational area. In 2011, they completed the connectivity. From 2011 onwards, they started having a plan of coming in the month of May or prior to May and going back on 1st of October, the raising day. And from 2017, after Doklam took place, they stopped going back because by then they had built up the military facility, the storage facility. There were ghost towns along the border which was coming up. Why didn't these aspects actually perk up our thought process? Why are they building these buildings? Is it for something? That did come to our mind, but unfortunately, our system is by the time you start applying your faculties, by let's say 18 months or 20 months, you are nearing or posting out. And by the time you come up to that peak level of contributing to the system, you're out. You're thinking about next station. So, lack of continuity is another issue. Surprise and disruption will remain central. Second point I want to tell my future generation is uh, application of minimum force. Firstly, China will never go in for any conflict. It will never. If at all it goes in for, it will be a kind of a hybrid warfare. Galwan was a form of a hybrid warfare. They were pushed. They were pushed because our strategic communication had stopped. Our levels of engagement had actually frozen. Whenever you have border dispute anywhere in the world, you will have some level in the military component, some component at the diplomatic level, some component at the political level. And within these three levels, you will have sub teams doing different kinds of things. Why wasn't there a thing which could enable us to anticipate? अरे बाबा अपने चाइना स्टडी ग्रुप का नाम लेके 1997 से 65 पॉइंट्स आप पेट्रोलिंग की किए does it mean for a common man that China also knew these 65 points? If they knew, why didn't you formalize? Why should they question us? Why did they come into our territory during Operation Vijay? We don't know, or China doesn't know what is our line of perception. In 1993, we accepted the same line of actual control, which was rejected by none other than our first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, way back in 59 and 60s, when Chow Lai was trying to define line of actual control. I am not trying to raise a finger to create a controversy or a problem. I am trying to give these points for our future generation to apply yourself, to think, so that we have a permanent solution. Now, I think I've taken too much time. I'll try and finish up. This, what I'm coming is their principle is to avoid violence. So what are they doing? They have shifted, migrated from geopolitics to geoeconomics. They want to win a war in future without fighting more. So how do you win that? In 70s or mid 70s, you had more than 70% of the world, countries in the world, which was doing economic activity with USA. Okay. Today, China is a country which is doing business with more than 100 countries. My rough calculation is saying 146, but I'll go by the open source. 120, 124 countries. 90% of the countries, it has got economic or trade surplus, including USA, including India. Okay. So similarly, in 1995, when the BRICS countries, people started talking, and they came into existence in 2009 or 10. BRIC countries, those 5 of them, if you total up, their total value of GDP was around 16%. And the leading economy, G7 countries, total value was around 43.6% GDP, PPP terms. By 2010, the 43.6% of the G7 countries had come down to somewhere around 36, 37%. And the BRICS countries had gone up to approximately 26%. By 2025, the countries, I'm talking about the PPP terms, the G7 countries, the total GDP value comparatively has come down to around 28 or 29%. And the BRICS countries, now they are no longer 5, there are 9 of them. There are 10 or 11 of them waiting. If you total up all this, even if you don't total up the people who are waiting, the partners, if you have the 9 of them, it has gone up to, gentlemen, approximately 46, 47% if you carry out minute calculation. But in open source, you'll find they have reached a figure of 40. So what is it I'm trying to indicate? I'm trying to indicate that the global south is actually rising, the shining spot of economy, and China is a predominating factor. And this is the Asia century. In Asia century, it is India century. By the turn of 21st century, India would have become not only a global power, a hyper superpower, provided we handle our population well, provided we discipline them, provided we factor in the youth bulge we have, provided we do everything, we don't create noise. We don't do bad baja before actually, handling the criticalities. Do learn how to do things quietly. I'm not saying manipulation. I'm saying engaging with every stakeholder from strategic non-alignment to strategic alignment. Now, in strategic alignment, we should do something what Piyush Goyal is doing. Quietly, EFTA has been signed. EFTA has been signed with an assurance of how many? I think 100 million jobs or something in the next 50 years, 15 years. A good number, I think 1 million job or some assurance has been given. Investment of $100 billion. Similarly, FTA has been signed with the UK. We need to actually finalize our FTA with the European Union. Same is the case with Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia, 10 countries. This is one bloc with whom we have got trade deficit. We need to actually go in for FTA, have our engagement, even if the ground factors are not favorable. Let's say this 1700 kilometers of our trilateral between Bangladesh, Myanmar, and going up to Thailand and Bangkok. It takes time to pick up. Even if it takes time, doesn't matter. Our maritime connectivity should be seen. We need to factor in your program only, Virender. I think I had made a point, Maldives, when we were discussing about Maldives. I had raised the point that the Chacos Island or the archipelago, India must negotiate with Mauritius. Today, the breaking news has come to me in the mobile. I hope I am not wrong. I have given a podcast also. The Chacos Island has been given next to USA. By the way, no living organism is allowed, permitted by USA to come anywhere close to Diego Garcia. How is it, despite all the drama and rhetorics going on about tariff and other issues, laundromat, India is fueling the conflict in Ukraine. How is it that USA has permitted or land or piece of island next to Diego Garcia? NTRO has been allowed. We are establishing signal intelligence to carry out the surveillance of the Chinese vessels or the submarine. There's such a technological handing over or transfer is taking place with India, which even NATO countries have never enjoyed. So I have been maintaining all this is drama. Munir going on the lap and having lunch there in the White House is also drama. Suddenly they'll be dropped like a hot break. You never know. India, USA, I'm convinced that USA cannot do without India because in their bipartisan documents of national security strategy, not 1 year, not 2 years, consistently for a number of years, there one line that statement that China will continue to remain as number one threat. They will channelize their effort and everything to contain, to counter, and if push comes to shove, they will do everything to contest against China. I am not discussing about Taiwan. Taiwan is a separate discussion. So therefore, the summary of this thing is coming to the next point. They will never prefer to have a protracted war. It is there in their document. Sun Tzu also had given the statement that protracted war is always harmful to the state. The third strand is coming to the national security planning because it is the centrality of the armed forces which is going to dominate the security planning. And finally, the threats to China's national security are very real. And if you have to prioritize, it is the domestic threat of China, which our military people have to understand, which is very, very critical, very serious. And the most serious issue is the factor of, there is a thing called a Gini factor. Inequality. Inequality is the issue which is killing China from inside. We can discuss that separately. And therefore, China will do anything and everything to unify, keep it united. And these are the fault lines. This is the major fault line which I'm sharing with our future generation and the leaders if they're listening. As military people, we need to focus on the criticalities in the fault lines. Inequality is a factor which must be actually developed. Rest all things, we are far, far behind, 20 to 30 years behind China. Not that I'm trying to make them 7.5 feet. We are discussing a issue theoretically so as to derive some conclusion so that our future generation also channelizes their thoughts and prepares accordingly. Because we cannot afford to have another Pahalgaon. We cannot afford to have another Galwan. We need to be proactive as much as we were to stall them when they came to the Dokala or the Dokla. We knew about this in 2013. The lines had been drawn. The chief was ready. The defense minister was ready. Lines had been drawn, and we are prepared that this is the only way to stop them. Similar things are happening. They are meandering about 9 kilometers away through a village called as Pagda. They are coming back to the Jafari Rus through a different route. So how do you stop? We need to keep our minds open. We need to actually apply ourselves, come out with something creative and innovative to prevent what is happening in Bangladesh. Otherwise, it will turn into another Islamic revolution army in the backyard. Radicalization will be in the forefront, and the China is as it is. It has penetrated into the Bangladesh in a very deep manner. You will have Americans sitting there. You will also have the Islamic fundamentalism manifesting in the ugliest of forms. Bangladesh army, as it is gradually showing signs of having become puppet, it will disappear from the map of Bangladesh. You, me, and others will be discussing. It's about time that we become proactive. We need to take actions to prevent launching of any operation taking place against our leaders, against our military installation, against our defense corridor, against any centers of excellence of economic activity in the country. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, sir. Very aptly covered the aspects of China and the impact of the development which is taking place, the Chinese theories, the way of thought process, like national humiliation. Probably a good point to for us also to learn and develop and bring it out. What all aspects we have had in our past history. That is a very good thing, and in that one issue comes to mind is that yes, we in future the rivalry will be there because the competition will be there in aspects, and one thing when United Nations was created, China became a member of the Security Council permanent. So question mark is there, why and how. Today, when we look at the developments taking place in terms of the technology, the need is there that innovations by Indians have to take forward things what is required to be done. And I personally feel that necessity is mother of invention. Probably they'll be able to bring out issues which will resolve many things which we are importing, and how to develop our own things. It's a question of time. And the important aspect which comes up is that the all gambits which happened, like FTA is what General Sudhakar Jee was saying. FTA is free trade agreements which are signed. If you remember the first podcast we had on the tariffs of the Trump, we had said that there will a lot of FTAs will be signed due to this, and a lot of realignments are going to take place. So that is happening. And with this realignment, with the Trump's tariff, one issue which I will request Colonel Vikram to cover is the India-China relations after the tariffs. It has gone a change. I'll request him to throw some light on that in a very brief way because we are running short of time. Over to you, Colonel Vikram.
Sir, what are you looking up? What should I be covering, sir?
You covered the Indo-China relations after the tariffs, Trump's tariff. Like we had changed our equations and our visit and our outlook along with China, and the tariffs coming in. Certain agreements have taken place, certain decisions or meetings have taken place between two nations. With our MEA also going, our external affairs minister, between our leaders politically and discussing various things, and how to probably obviate the effects of the tariffs imposed by Trump.
May I request if you only cover, because I am not, frankly speaking, prepared. But
No
however, I
problem.
can. We
Yeah,
can always
you,
we
yeah,
can always
you
talk about that, sir.
yeah. The
If,
relationship between India and China, the latest
sir,
one which is happening. Yeah.
sir, if now whatever I prepared, I just talk about that, sir. The
Yeah.
economic balance per se, sir. China manufacturing dominance contrasts with Indian growing service sector and dividend. The future may see India emerging as a counterweight, not through confrontation, but through surely about the competitive resilience. Talk about the strategic alignment per se, sir. China Belt and Road Initiative seeks to redraw trade and influential corridor through Asia, across Asia, for now through Asia, across Asia. Now India's response through initiative like Sagar, the full form is the security and growth for all in the region and partnership with Asian and Africa. It reflects the vision of inclusive connectivity rather than dependency. Talk about the technology rivalry per se, the race for 5G, semiconductors, AI, and cyber capabilities adds a new frontiers to their contest. The control over data and digital infrastructure will determine who leads the next wave of global innovation. Now, I'll talk about the global governance. Both the nations are aspire for a greater voice in world institutions like UN, IMF, and the World Bank. The India advocates reform and representation, China influence and control. Their competing vision of world order will continue to clash, one democratic, the other authoritarian. Now, if I have to talk about the framework of mutual respect per se, despite all the challenge which has been only given, there is a space for coexistence and cooperation. Both the nation, as we are aware, share concern about climate change, regional terrorism, and a global trade stability. They can collaborate in multilateral forums such as BRICS, SCO, and G2 platforms that allow dialogue without dominance. Now, talk about India. For India, the path forward lies in major engagements, asserting sovereignty, strengthening alliances, and maintaining economic self-reliance while keeping communication channel open. Talk about China per se, the realization must come that respect, not coercion, will win long-term influence. In Asia, future there is a room for both, but not at the cost of other dignity. This is what I have prepared, sir.
Thank you, Col Vikram, and very aptly brought out the issues which are relevant today, and particularly in terms of the economic development and how both nations have to carry forward, seeing the situation developing in the world. There are certain things what have happened is like, particularly after the episodes of the tariffs coming in by Trump at various forums and how things are happening, there has been a lot of realignment of nations, a lot of economic realignment, a lot of, I would say, discussions and MOUs being signed, and a lot of movement of the leaders across the world to further streamline the issues which are cropping up after the tariffs. And it will shape the world of future, and it is bound to happen that probably the need of the day is that the impact of the tariffs which are coming in, that needs to be negated. And how it is need to be negated? Something which is drastic, yes, it brings out a better way of settlement. I feel that the FTAs coming up is the better way of looking at how to deal with the tariffs imposed by Trump. Is bound to happen. And yes, what General Sudhakar Jee had said, that through Myanmar and Thailand, where the need is there that India should have a free trade agreement and needs to be developed further. And finally, I think most of the questions which have been asked have been covered by in the discussion. And I'll now request General Sudhakarji to sum up the future aspects of the world in relation to India and China in a very, very brief way. Over to you, sir.
Okay,
Sir,
Virendra,
before
thank you.
excuse me, sir, before the Jan Sudhakar ji say something, I just want to have my closing thought, if it is not a
Yeah,
problem, sir.
yes. Yeah.
Please,
Sir,
please, please.
sir, because I got a chance to given by General Sudhakar and you, sir. I would like to have my closing thought. As an
Yes, please.
Indian, I believe we must approach this rivalry with clarity, not with fear. We must know our strength, our democracy, our youth, our innovation, and our moral compass. China may have scale, but India has soul. And in the long game of civilization, that makes all the difference. Thank you, sir. This I want
Yeah.
to give it my closing thoughts, sir.
Thanks, Col Vikram. Very happily brought out democracy, and China is there where it needs to be seen. Over to Jan Sudhakar Ji. Sir,
I
briefly.
must thank Colonel Vikram for having been so candid in his expression, and thank you so much. Why not? That actually defines our self pride as Indian. We must always respect what he has
Sure.
said in one or two lines, and we must keep that in the back of our mind when you formulate our policies. But the fact of the matter is, this is for the first time that independent India has come out with a long-term perspective plan and has shared openly that by 2047 we would like to become a global power with an economic status of 30 trillion US dollars. This is what I have been harping for past while in service as also outside the service after retirement. Unless you have an objective, the mind wo kahavat hai na medical science mein, unless your mind knows, the eyes don't see. People have to be told and reminded time and again. 30 trillion dollar. Number two, to make it happen in a noisy democracy like India, our opposition has to become responsible. 1962 war took place because our opposition party was ineffective. How dare a prime minister bulldoze his way through? In fact, forward policy was not our policy. It was imposed on us. People don't even know that we continue to remain under Western dominance and the influence till 1965, as close as 1970, I would say. In my opinion, I may be wrong. I'm a student. I also want to keep my cup of tea empty so that I keep learning. Forward policy was a policy which was imposed on us. That needs to be highlighted because that's why Hindenburg report is not being declassified. People must read and come out with this. Who is the one who kept this forward policy which become a trigger? Anyway, to come to the issues, you raised a point regarding tariff. We would do well to this platform because this is an extension of our close platform. Let people not be misled. The tariff problem is a problem which has been created by Donald Trump. The old organization, which was created by none other than USA itself, is being defied. It is being disrespected. He's walked out from that WTO, which was created by the USS initiative in 1997. It cannot happen like this. The tariff is there is a margin of safety to operate for all countries. There is a certain percentage to safeguard the interest of your own country, indigenous agriculture or your industry. WTO allows that. But when that is being applied to protect your own people, you cannot brand that as a protectionism. Every country is not like a leading economy. They have stolen, they have looted everything from our country and become leading economies. We have a role and responsibility for our own people. When you do that, Donald Trump starts jumping and starts withdrawing from the establishment and the organizations which have been created by America. He's a different kind of man. This arbitrariness of application and withdrawal should be subjected to scrutiny by some neutral agency in the apex organization of the global order. Has the global order come to a state of defunctness? We need to factor this in and need to actually take some measure so that some method in madness comes up towards progressive, forward-looking, rules-based order. That is as far as the global order tariff is concerned. Now there is a huge geopolitical churn, polarization, the global challenges are being ignored, climate change is a bigger danger, terrorism is being spoken glibly until next 9/11 takes place. Same America will keep behaving the way it is behaving. So I only hope and pray that it doesn't take place. And I hope and pray some sanity comes into the minds with the mindful of the fact that all that we are witnessing today for past 9 months, Donald Trump 2.0, is just it is an enigmatic turn of events. There is a bigger plan in place as per my understanding, and the bigger plan in place is that what I have already stated in my part, some semblance of orderliness has to come in to bring sanity towards the Central Europe, bring this mindless conflict to an end, bring the conflict to an end towards the Middle East. It cannot happen because I have my logic, time doesn't permit. Also, bring in some sanity towards the subcontinent because the 21st century will witness the gravitation of all powers and forces towards the Indian subcontinent. It is going to be the global basket of commercial activities. Therefore, America is putting pressure. America is a superpower. Thucydide trap says that no superpower will ever like to lose its supremacy and authority. And it cannot see any rising power to come anywhere closer to its footing. What it means is, what is China to USA? India is to China, as also India is to USA. India doesn't want to create a second China which will be threatening to overtake it. It is already there in established documents. By 2038, India would have overtaken the USA as far as PPP terms. By 2038, we would be having an economy which will be larger than the USA. China would be number one, number two is going to be India as far as PPP is concerned. So, under these circumstances, India must learn how to put its head down. And not that I'm saying will not do bootlicking, will not compromise our soul, Colonel Vikram, to respond to your point.
Sure.
Will remain absolutely autonomous, will respect your strategic autonomy. All I am saying is, despite what I am saying, because we know if we have to achieve a target of 30 trillion US dollar economy, you cannot go ahead without the minerals. You cannot go ahead with the tunneling equipment is lying for 2.5 years in the shipyard of China. You cannot go ahead if your farmers are suffering because the fertilizer is lying there, it is being held back by the Chinese. You cannot actually do your electric vehicle manufacturing successfully. Prime Minister has taken pride in announcing to the world we are exporting the electric vehicle to 100 countries. You cannot let that happen if your graphite blocks, or hard graphite, is not being imported from the easily available supply chain, that is China. You need to identify which are the critical components without which our Atmanirbhar Bharat cannot become a sustainable progressive project. Today, let me remind everyone, your Atmanirbhar Bharat or Make in India and Make for the World, or whatever you call it by any name, you cannot take off in earnest until you have your supply chain defined and your dependency is crystallized. And that crystallization of dependency is actually, calibrating your ways and methods with China. And as situation is actually developing in that direction, there is no harm. No harm. Safeguard the national security, do not compromise the national security and national interest, collaborate, if not collaborate, cooperate with China to that an extent which is advantageous and favorable to India. Do not compromise your national pride and the spirit of being an Indian. That is all I have to say. Last but not the least, resolve the boundary issue at the earliest. If you do not, China will like to prefer to keep it open ended. Continue doing salami slicing. I tend to agree with what Colonel Vikram said. His ultimate aim is to cut across India, negotiate with India. There are 9 or 8 national highways which have been approved as per the blueprint available under the BRI heading, which will cut across the entire length, 1,700 kilometers of Nepal, cut across India and reach Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea. China today is suffering the longest sea lanes of communication. When it comes to its energy security, it's 60% value of its export, 60%. Otherwise, it's close to 75 to 80% of its export. It's an export-oriented economy, is through the maritime trade. And it is desperately looking for easy access to warm water ports along Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea. That, in any case, is a no-go situation, but India has to calculate its terms and calibrate so that we derive maximum mileage out of our cooperative approach with China as much as possible. 300 scientists of Foxconn, they were sent back to China or wherever they came from Tamil Nadu, without anything in writing. by a word of mouth direction. And your assembly unit of I-17 of the Foxconn, it was without those people. And suddenly the production output actually came down. That is the impact it will have. So you have to factor in all this. And summary is that we need to respect the identification of the problem. That problem is, to some degree, to some extent, our dependency will with China will remain. Our FDI criticality will remain. We need to open up our economy to some extent without compromising the national security, but settle your border at the earliest. That's it.
Thank you, sir. It is essential that the irritants between India and China needs to be resolved, and maybe in a way that it is advantageous to us also. Uh, yes, very rightly brought out that the irritants which are there, they can be misutilized or utilized by China to further the interest in our nation. And personally, I feel that two aspects of economic development and military development. The third aspect can be innovations. Innovations in as a necessity, what all we don't have, how to obviate that and how to plug those gaps is very, very essential. And coming times, probably this is going to happen. Uh, our innovations, our scientists, and they have to work harder. And the requirement is that the essentials which is required for development of the nation, these needs to be manufactured within. The other issue which is with this is that yes, we cannot be totally independent of the world order or the world global economy or essentials which come from other nations. Now, the world in which we are staying and we are living, it does have all items coming from various places. Your clothes are coming from some place, your shoes are coming from some other place, your aeroplanes are coming from other place. So all those things are happening. But gainfully utilizing those issues is one issue that needs to be seen. And finally, the neighbor of ours will remain. China will be our neighbor, like the geographical location cannot be changed. We cannot select our neighbors. Neighbors will be there, and we have to deal with them amicably and to our own advantage. And maybe that coming times, hopefully, with our thought process at the highest level changing and some sort of developments taking place in terms of the economic development, financial and militarily. Probably, to my mind, India and China will be having a situation wherein they'll be walking the path together. With this, I come to the end of today's discussion and podcast. I thank the audience. I thank General Sudhakar Jee and Colonel Vikram to put across very candid views on the issue. It's a vast subject, like what General Sudhakar Jee had said, a vast country, vast subject, vast implications. And time is too short to discuss, but all aspects have been covered. And I also thank Aishwarya. She is in the backdrop today to look after us technically from Delhi clause. Thank you, Aishwarya. And I sign off here. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Thank you, sir. Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you very